Today we're listening to the story of Astrid's transformation from an ordinary farmer's daughter to a deadly warrior. The brutal training that began at age 12, the first moment of bloodshed, survival on the battlefield. Close your eyes and witness a Viking girl's journey to becoming a warrior 1,000 years ago. Welcome to Historical Stories for Sleeping. Before we begin this incredible story of a shield maiden whose fierce heart once wielded sword and shield in the frozen battlefields of medieval Scandinavia, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe that true courage knows no gender, hit that subscribe button and share this story to help us honor those who fought for honor and glory in the ancient world. Now settle back, close your eyes, and let yourself drift back to the year 875 CE, to the windswept fjords of Norway, where a young girl named Astrid is about to discover that her destiny lies not on the hearth, but on the battlefield. The morning mist clings to the fjord like the breath of sleeping gods as 12-year-old Astrid wakes in her family's longhouse. The year is 875 CE, and life in the Norwegian settlement of Jorgvin follows the ancient rhythms of seed and harvest, storm and calm. Her father Bjorn tends cattle and barley fields carved from the rocky coastline. Her mother Sigrid weaves wool and tends the hearth fire that never dies. For 12 years, Astrid has lived the life expected of a Norse girl. She has learned to card wool, to churn butter, to smoke fish for the long winter months. Her small hands have grown calloused from grinding grain, and her back strong from carrying water from the well. She knows the songs her mother hums while weaving, the prayers whispered to Frigg for a good harvest, the stories told when the northern lights dance across the winter sky. But Astrid is different, though she doesn't yet know how different. The longhouse where she was born sits on a slope overlooking the fjord, its massive wooden frame hewn from trees that grew when her grandfather's grandfather was young. The walls are thick planks chinked with moss and mud, the roof a heavy thatch that keeps out the driving rain of the coastal storms. Inside, the central hearth sends smoke curling up toward the hole in the roof, while oil lamps cast dancing shadows on carved support posts decorated with protective runes. The building houses not just Astrid's immediate family, but also her uncle Ragnar and his wife, two elderly thralls who have served the family for decades, and whatever guests the sacred laws of hospitality require them to shelter. Privacy is a luxury unknown to most Norse families. Life unfolds in the common spaces, with only hanging curtains to separate sleeping areas from the main hall. While other girls her age play with carved wooden dolls, Astrid watches her brothers practice sword work in the yard. Eric, the eldest at 18, moves with the fluid grace of a born warrior, his blade singing through the air in perfect arcs. Olaf, 2 years younger, compensates for lesser skill with fierce determination, his practice sessions leaving him sweat-soaked and exhausted, while her female cousins embroider cloth with threads of many colors, learning the intricate patterns that mark a woman's skill with needle and loom. Astrid studies the movements of warriors. She memorizes the way they shift their weight before a strike, the subtle telegraph of muscles tensing, the precise timing that makes the difference between a killing blow and a merely painful one. Her fascination with weapons extends beyond mere observation. When the family gathers for the evening meal, and the men speak of battles fought and raids planned, Astrid listens with an intensity that makes her mother frown. Other girls fidget or doze during these conversations, bored by talk of shipbuilding and tactical formations. Astrid absorbs every word, filing away information about sword techniques and shield formations with the dedication of a scholar memorizing sacred texts. The changes in her are subtle, but noticeable to those who know her well. Her hands, when she thinks no one is watching, mimic the grip patterns she has seen Eric use on his sword hilt. Her feet, as she goes about her daily chores, unconsciously practice the footwork she has observed during training sessions. Even her posture has begun to change, becoming more centered, more balanced, as if she is always ready to move in any direction at a moment's notice. Her father notices first. Bjorn is a practical man, weathered by 40 winters, and as steady as the mountains that ring their fjord. He has the observant eyes of someone who has survived 2 decades of Viking raids and political upheavals, and he sees things in his daughter that others miss. The girl has the heart of a wolf, he tells his wife one evening as they sit by the fire, their voices low to avoid waking the children. I've seen her watching the warriors. She doesn't look away when they speak of battle, doesn't shudder when old Torsten tells his stories of the Blood Eagle and the Raven's Feast. Other girls her age. They turn pale. They make excuses to leave. Astrid, she leans closer. Sigrid frowns, her hands never pausing in their weaving. The rhythm of the loom has been the soundtrack to their evening conversations for 20 years of marriage, as constant as the sound of waves against the shore. She is our daughter. Her place is here, at the loom, by the hearth. The gods made women to bear children and keep the home fires burning. Perhaps, Bjorn says, but his eyes drift to where Astrid sits in the shadows beyond the firelight, supposedly mending a torn cloak, but obviously listening to every word they speak. But the gods also made the Valkyries, and they were warriors first, women second. The conversation touches on something deeper than mere parental concern. In the Norse world, gender roles are not as rigid as they will become in later centuries, but they are still clearly defined. Women can own property, request divorces, and speak their minds in public assemblies. Some even take up weapons in defense of their homes or accompany their husbands on raids. But the warrior's path is primarily a man's road, and those women who choose it must be prepared to face not just physical danger, but social isolation. Sigrid understands this better than her husband. She has lived her entire life in a world where a woman's worth is measured by her skill at the loom and her fertility at the birthing bed. The idea that her daughter might choose a different path fills her with a complex mixture of fear and incomprehension. What would you have her do? She asks quietly. Take up sword and shield? Sail with the raiding parties? Fight and die like a man? I would have her follow her nature, Bjorn replies. And if her nature is to be a warrior, then perhaps the gods have a purpose for her that we cannot see. The conversation might have ended there. Another late-night discussion that fades with the dying embers of the fire. But 3 days later, everything changes. The attack comes at dawn, when the mist is thickest and the settlement's guard is down. Saxon raiders, 20 strong, sailing in 2 small boats that cut through the fjord like knives through silk. They beach their vessels in the pre-dawn darkness and move like ghosts between the longhouses, their presence revealed only by the soft crunch of footsteps on frost-covered ground. These are not the random pirates that sometimes raid isolated settlements. These are professional warriors, possibly deserters from the great armies that fight and die in the kingdoms to the south. Their gear is good quality, iron weapons, leather armor reinforced with metal studs, shields bearing the painted designs of veteran fighters. They move with the coordinated precision of men who have done this many times before. Their plan is simple and effective. Strike fast, take what they can carry, kill anyone who resists, and be back on the water before the settlement can organize a defense. In a community of farmers and fishermen, with only a handful of men who have any real combat experience, such a plan has an excellent chance of success. They have not counted on Astrid. She wakes to the sound of splintering wood and her mother's scream. The noise cuts through her dreams like a seeks through silk, jerking her from sleep with a suddenness that sends her heart hammering against her ribs. For a moment, she lies still in her sleeping furs, hoping that what she heard was just part of a nightmare. The sound comes again, not wind, not storm, but the deliberate crash of iron on wood, the distinctive sound of weapons being used for their intended purpose. Orange light flickers through the smoke holes in the roof, painting the interior of the longhouse with wavering shadows. Fire. Someone has set buildings ablaze. Astrid. Her father's voice cuts through the chaos, sharp with command and edged with fear. Take your mother and your sister. Go to the sacred grove. Hide until the danger passes. The sacred grove lies half a mile inland, a stand of ancient oaks where the local god poles stand and offerings are made to ensure good harvests and safe voyages. It is considered neutral ground, protected by divine law even in times of war. Women and children traditionally flee there during raids, confident that even the most bloodthirsty warriors will respect the sanctuary of the gods. But when Astrid looks toward her parents' sleeping alcove, she sees something that stops her cold. Her father is buckling on his sword belt with hands that shake, not from fear, but from age and old injuries that have never fully healed. Bjorn is a farmer now, but once he was a warrior. Once, 20 years ago, he could have faced 20 Saxons without fear. Now he's 42 years old, which makes him an elderly man by the standards of his violent age. His sword arm bears the white scars of a dozen battles, and his left leg still aches from a spear wound taken in a raid on the Frankish coast. He is brave. No one has ever questioned Bjorn's courage, but he is no longer young, no longer quick, no longer the man who once stood in the shield wall beside Earl Magnus himself. And there are 20 of them. Through the doorway, Astrid can see 3 Saxon warriors in the yard, their weapons red in the firelight. They move with the easy confidence of professionals, checking corners and covering each other's movements with military precision. These are not desperate men driven to raiding by hunger or political upheaval. These are killers who have chosen violence as their trade. Her father emerges from the longhouse to face them, his old sword steady in his hand despite the tremor that age has brought to his limbs. For a moment, the two sides simply look at each other across the frost-covered ground, predators sizing up prey, veterans recognizing veterans. Then the young Saxon on the left grins and says something in his own language, something that makes his companions laugh. His seeks, the short, brutal knife that gives the Saxons their name, darts forward like a serpent's tongue, testing Bjorn's reflexes. The old farmer's blade moves to intercept, muscle memory guiding steel even when conscious thought is too slow. The parry is successful but clumsy, and Astrid can see that her father's movements lack the fluid grace they once possessed. He is fighting with the echoes of old skill, but his body cannot match what his mind remembers. The young Saxon circles left, his confidence growing as he realizes that his opponent is past his prime. His next attack is more aggressive, a combination of cuts that force Bjorn to give ground. The older man parries desperately, but he is too slow. The Sikh slides past his guard and opens a red line across his ribs. It is at this moment that Astrid makes a choice that will echo through the rest of her life. Instead of fleeing to the sacred grove with her mother and sister, instead of hiding in the darkness until the raiders depart, she slips through the smoke-filled longhouse to where her older brother's weapons hang on the wall. Eric is away, trading in Dublin, and his sword and shield weighed and used. The sword is heavier than anything she has ever lifted, its iron blade as long as her arm from fingertip to elbow. The hilt is wrapped in leather worn smooth by Eric's grip, and the pommel bears the carved image of Thor's hammer. This is no farmer's tool or woman's eating knife, but a weapon forged for war, balanced for killing, blessed by the smith who made it and the warriors who have wielded it. The shield is equally substantial, layers of lindenwood covered in leather and painted with the image of a raven in flight. It bears the dents and scrapes of actual use, the proud scars of a shield that has turned aside enemy blades and protected its bearer in the heat of battle. Eric has carried this shield through 3 raiding seasons, and it has never failed him. Now they are hers. Through the doorway, she can see that the fight in the yard has taken a turn for the worse. Her father faces 3 Saxon warriors now, and though he fights with the desperate courage of a man defending his home, his situation is hopeless. One of the Saxons is young, quick, hungry for glory. His Sikh's darts like a serpent's tongue, seeking the gaps in Bjorn's guard. The old farmer parries again, but his movements are growing sluggish. Age and injury have taken their toll, and he cannot maintain the pace that combat demands. The Sikh slips through his defense and opens another red line, this one across his sword arm. Astrid doesn't remember crossing the threshold. She doesn't remember raising the shield or lifting the sword. What she remembers is the sound, a howl that comes from somewhere deep in her chest, somewhere she never knew existed, a sound like winter wind, like the cry of hunting wolves, like the war scream of the Valkyries themselves. The sound freezes everyone in the yard for a crucial heartbeat. Saxon warriors turn toward the noise, their faces showing first confusion, then contempt. A child, a girl, playing with weapons too large for her hands. But there is something in that cry that speaks to deeper instincts, something that raises the hair on the back of the neck and sends ice through the veins. It is the sound that prey animals make when they turn at bay, the noise that echoes from the battlefields of the gods. The young Saxon recovers first, his contempt overriding his instincts. A girl child with a man's sword. It is almost insulting that she thinks to face him. He turns from Bjorn, confident that an old man with 2 wounds will not be able to interfere, and advances on this new target with a mocking smile. He never sees the blow that takes his life. The sword, guided by 12 years of secretly watching, unconsciously mimicking, instinctively learning, finds the gap between his mail shirt and his belt. It slides between his ribs like it was always meant to be there, piercing hard and lumb with surgical precision. The Saxon looks down at the blade protruding from his side, looks up at the 12-year-old girl who has killed him, and dies with his mouth open in surprise. The iron tastes different from anything else in the world. It is salt and copper, fear and rage, the metallic tang of mortality itself. Astrid tastes it on the air as the Saxon's blood steams in the cold morning, and something inside her recognizes it as a flavor she was born to savor. The other 2 Saxons stare in shock. In their world, in their understanding of how things work, this is impossible. Girls do not kill warriors. Children do not stand against grown men with blade and shield. There are natural laws that govern such things, hierarchies of strength and skill that cannot be overturned by mere chance. But impossible things happen when the gods take notice, and the gods are watching Astrid now. The second Saxon comes at her with an axe, thinking to end this aberration quickly before it can spread doubt among his companions. But Astrid has been watching warriors for 12 years, studying their movements with the unconscious intensity of a natural predator. She knows that anger makes men stupid, that fury robs them of the patience that combat requires. She lets him commit to an overhead strike, his axe raised high and his torso exposed. Then she steps aside with the economical movement of a dancer, letting his momentum carry him past her. Her sword opens his throat as he stumbles by, sending a spray of arterial blood across the frost-covered ground. The third Saxon, the oldest and wisest of the 3, does something that surprises everyone, including himself. He has seen too many battles, witnessed too many impossible things, to dismiss what has just happened as mere luck. He lowers his weapon and backs away, his eyes fixed on the blood-spattered girl who has just killed 2 of his companions with movements too precise, too economical, to be accidental. Valkyrie, he whispers in his own tongue, the word carrying like a prayer or a curse. Death chooser. He turns and runs, his warrior's pride forgotten in the face of something that his mind cannot process. Behind him, his companions lie dead in the frost, their blood slowly freezing in the morning air. The other Saxon raiders, hearing the sounds of battle and seeing one of their number fleeing in apparent terror, begin to disengage from their attacks on other parts of the settlement. Professional warriors know when a raid has gone wrong, when the cost of continuing outweighs the potential profit. Within minutes, they are retreating to their boats, carrying their wounded and leaving their dead behind. Later, after the Saxons have been driven off or killed, after the fires have been put out and the wounded tended, Astrid sits in the ashes of their burned grain storage, still holding Eric's sword. The blade is red to the crossguard, and her hands shake, not from fear, but from an emotion she cannot name. Her father finds her there as the sun climbs above the mountains, painting the fjord gold and red like the blood on her sword. "Daughter," he says quietly, settling beside her in the ash, "are you hurt?" She shakes her head. She is not hurt. She is changed. Something fundamental has shifted inside her, like a lock clicking open or a key turning in a door she never knew existed. "I killed them," she says, and her voice is steady despite the magnitude of what she has done. "I killed 2 men." "Yes," Bjorn says, and there is something in his voice that might be pride or might be mourning. "I saw." They sit in silence for a long moment, father and daughter, watching the smoke rise from the burned buildings. Around them, the settlement begins the work of recovery, counting the dead, tending the wounded, assessing the damage done by men who kill for profit. Finally, Bjorn speaks again. "Your mother will say it was the gods acting through you, that Odin himself guided your blade, that the Valkyries whispered in your ear. What do you say?" Bjorn looks at his daughter, really looks at her, perhaps for the first time. He sees the way she holds the sword, not like a tool she found, but like an extension of her arm. He sees the set of her shoulders, the way her eyes scan the horizon for threats, the unconscious alertness of someone who has looked death in the face and not blinked. "I say," he tells her, "that you are my daughter, and you have the heart of a berserker, and I think your path lies somewhere I cannot follow." That afternoon, as the settlement begins the work of rebuilding, a ship appears on the horizon, a longboat with a red and white striped sail, moving fast across the gray water with the purposeful urgency of a hunting shark. As it draws closer, they can see the carved dragon head at its prow, the painted shields hung along its sides, the glint of weapons in the afternoon sun. Vikings, but not raiders. The ship flies the peace banner, and its crew makes no attempt at concealment. These are either traders or kinsmen, coming openly in daylight with news or aid. The ship beaches with a grinding of wood on stone. 12 warriors leap into the surf, their mail bright with spray, their weapons bound with peace knots to show they come in friendship. At their head walks a woman. She is perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean as a hunting hound, with the predatory grace of someone who has spent half her life in combat. Her hair is the color of winter wheat, braided with silver wire and hung with rings of gold taken from defeated enemies. She wears a mail shirt that fits her like a second skin, crafted by a master smith, and worth more than most farmers earn in a lifetime. At her side hangs a sword with a pommel carved in the shape of a wolf's head, and even at rest it seems to radiate menace. This is Ingrid Ragnarsdottir, called the Wolf-Mother, captain of the ship Storm Rider and leader of the warband that serves Earl Magnus of the Orkney Islands. She has come to investigate the smoke visible from 20 miles away, to offer aid to kinsmen in need, or to claim salvage rights if the settlement has been destroyed. But when she sees Astrid sitting in the ash, still holding the bloody sword, her pale eyes narrow with interest. "Whose work is this?" Ingrid asks Bjorn, nodding toward the bodies of the 2 Saxons that still lie in the yard, their blood already beginning to attract the ravens. The question is asked in the matter-of-fact tone of someone who has seen many battlefields, who can read the story written in blood and steel, the positioning of the bodies, the nature of their wounds, the absence of defensive injuries. All of these details tell a tale to eyes that know how to interpret them. "My daughters," Bjorn says, and there is pride in his voice, mixed with something that might be sorrow. Ingrid approaches Astrid slowly, like one might approach a young wolf that hasn't decided whether to flee or fight. She has the movement patterns of someone who has survived 2 decades of combat, each step calculated to convey confidence without aggression, strength without immediate threat. She stops 3 paces away and studies the girl with eyes pale as winter ice, taking in details that others might miss. The way Astrid grips the sword, the set of her shoulders, the alert stillness of someone who has recently faced death and found it to their liking. "How old are you, child?" 12 winters, Astrid answers, not moving from her place in the ash, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what has happened. "And this was your first killing?" "Yes." The word hangs in the air between them, simple and final. There's no boasting in it, no false modesty, just a flat acknowledgement of fact. How did it feel? The question is crucial, Ingrid knows. The answer will tell her everything she needs to know about this girl, who has just crossed the line between innocence and experience, between childhood and something else entirely. Astrid's mother would want her to say it felt terrible, that she wept for the lives she took, that she praised to the gods for forgiveness. Her father might hope to hear that she acted only from necessity, that she felt no pleasure in the deed. But Astrid has never been good at lying, and she will not start now. It felt right, she says quietly, her young voice carrying across the ash-covered ground, like I was doing what I was born to do. Ingrid nods slowly, as if this answer confirms something she already suspected. In her experience, warriors come in two types: those who kill because they must and spend the rest of their lives trying to forget, and those who kill because they can and spend the rest of their lives seeking opportunities to do it again. The first type makes adequate soldiers. The second type makes legends. Stand up, she commands, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. Astrid rises, the sword still in her hand. She is small for her age, barely reaching Ingrid's shoulder, but she moves with a kind of unconscious grace that speaks of natural talent. More importantly, she doesn't flinch from the older woman's scrutiny, doesn't look away or make excuses. Show me your stance. Without thinking, Astrid shifts into the fighting position she has watched her brothers practice 1,000 times. Feet apart for balance, weight evenly distributed, sword held in a middle guard position that can flow instantly into attack or defense. The shield comes up naturally, positioned to protect without blocking her vision. It is not perfect. Her grip could be better. Her stance could be more stable. But it shows understanding of fundamental principles that many trained warriors never fully grasp. Good. Now strike at me. Astrid hesitates. Ingrid is a stranger, a guest, a woman who has offered aid in their time of need. It would be wrong to attack her, even in play, even as a demonstration. Strike at me, Ingrid repeats, her voice carrying a slight edge of impatience, or I will think you are a child playing with her father's toys. The insult hits its mark. Astrid's eyes flash with sudden anger, and she moves without thinking, the sword cutting through the air in a strike aimed at Ingrid's neck. It is not a child's petulant swipe, but a real attack, delivered with intent to kill. The blow never lands. Ingrid's own blade appears as if by magic, catching Astrid's sword and turning it aside with casual ease. But she is nodding, and there is something like approval in her expression. You move well for one with no training, she says, stepping back and lowering her weapon. Your instincts are sound. Your form needs work, but that can be taught. What cannot be taught is the willingness to strike without hesitation when the moment demands it. She sheathes her sword and turns to Bjorn, her manner becoming formal as she makes what is clearly a prepared offer. I propose to take your daughter into my warband. She will learn the ways of the Shieldmaiden, the arts of war and death that have been passed down through generations of warrior women. In 3 years, if she survives the training, she will be a fighter worthy of Valhalla. The offer hangs in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Around them, the settlement continues its work of recovery, but the core of the drama has shifted to this small circle of people standing in the ash of burned buildings. Bjorn looks at his daughter, sees the hunger in her eyes, the way her grip unconsciously tightens on the sword hilt. He recognizes the expression. It is the same look he once wore when he stood on beaches far from home, waiting for the signal to charge into battle. And if I refuse, he asks, though he already knows what his answer will be, then she will remain here, Ingrid says matter-of-factly. She will marry some farmer's son in a few years, bear children, tend hearth and loom. She will live a safe life, a normal life, a life that her mother would approve of. She pauses, her pale eyes fixed on Astrid's face. But she will always be a warrior's soul trapped in a woman's life. And that, Ingrid says quietly, is a kind of death. The truth of those words resonates through the small group like the tolling of a funeral bell. They all understand what is being offered here, not just training in weapons and tactics, but the chance for Astrid to become what she was born to be. Astrid steps forward before her father can answer. Her decision made the moment Ingrid spoke of warriors' souls and women's lives. "I will come," she says, her voice clear and strong despite her youth. "I will learn to be what I was born to be." Bjorn closes his eyes for a moment, seeing in his mind's eye the little girl who used to help him tend the cattle, who learned her letters by tracing runes in the sand, who laughed as she chased the farm dogs through the barley fields. That child is gone now, replaced by someone harder, more focused, marked by violence in ways that cannot be undone. "When would you take her?" he asks. "Now," Ingrid replies. "Today." The longer she waits, the harder it becomes to leave. And I have seen what happens to young warriors who hesitate at the threshold. They spend their lives wondering what might have been. The practical arrangements are settled quickly. Astrid will take only what she can carry: a few pieces of clothing, the weapon she claimed in battle, and a small wooden carving of Thor's hammer that her grandfather made for her when she was small. Everything else belongs to her old life, the life she is leaving behind. Sigrid appears as they are making these arrangements, her face pale with grief and something that might be anger. She has been tending the wounded in another part of the settlement, and returns to find her daughter preparing to sail away with strangers. "You cannot take her," she says to Ingrid, her voice shaking with emotion. "She is just a child. She belongs here with her family." "She belongs wherever her heart calls her," Ingrid replies gently, "and her heart has already chosen." "She doesn't understand what she's choosing," Sigrid insists. "She sees only the glory, not the price. She doesn't know what it means to live by the sword." "No," Ingrid agrees. "She doesn't, but she will learn, and if she survives the learning, she will become something extraordinary." Sigrid turns to her daughter, searching Astrid's face for some sign of doubt, some indication that this madness might yet be avoided. "Is this truly what you want?" she asks. "To leave everything, everyone you've ever known, to go among strangers and learn to kill?" Astrid looks around the settlement that has been her world for 12 years. She sees the burned buildings, the bloodstains in the frost, the faces of neighbors who will forever remember her as the girl who saved them. She thinks of the quiet life that awaits her here: marriage, children, the endless cycle of seasons marked by wool and weaving. And she thinks of the feeling that coursed through her when she drove steel into Saxon flesh, the sense of absolute rightness that filled her when the sword found its mark. "Yes," she says simply, "this is what I want." That night, as the settlement sleeps and her family prepares for her departure, Astrid stands at the edge of the fjord, looking out across the dark water. Tomorrow she will leave everything she has ever known. Tomorrow she will begin a journey that may end in glory or death, or something between the two. Behind her, the burned buildings stand like blackened teeth against the star-filled sky. The smell of smoke still hangs in the air, mixed with the salt tang of the sea and the metallic scent of blood that seems to have soaked into the very ground. Ahead of her, the sea stretches away into mystery and possibility. Somewhere across those dark waters lies her destiny, her chance to become what she was born to be. The path will be hard. Ingrid has made no promises about that. Many who begin the warrior's road never reach its end. But for the first time in her life, Astrid feels like she is moving toward something rather than merely enduring what fate has placed before her. She is 12 years old. She has killed 2 men, and her real life is about to begin. The storm rider cuts through gray waters under a sky the color of old iron, her dragon prow cleaving the waves with the steady rhythm of a ship built for war and long voyages. Astrid stands at the stern, one hand gripping the carved rail, watching her homeland fade into mist and memory. The ship rocks beneath her feet with the complex motion of a vessel under sail, but she has found her sea legs quickly. Another sign, Ingrid says, that she was born for this life. The ability to adapt to the motion of a longship is not something that can be taught. Either the sea accepts you or it doesn't. The Storm Rider is a masterpiece of Norse shipbuilding, 70 feet from stem to stern, and built from the finest oak that gold can buy. Her hull is clinker-built, each plank overlapping the one below it and secured with iron rivets that gleam like stars against the dark wood. Her sail is woven from the finest wool, dyed in alternating stripes of red and white that can be seen for miles away. The crew of the Storm Rider numbers 23 souls, 15 men, 8 women, all warriors, all bound to Ingrid by oaths that are stronger than blood and tested in the crucible of shared danger. They watch the new recruit with eyes that miss nothing, measuring her potential with the calculating gaze of professionals who know that their lives may someday depend on her skill. Some show curiosity, interested in this girl who killed her first enemies at 12 and asked for more. Others display skepticism, wondering if she can truly become a warrior or if she is merely a child playing at being something she is not. A few show outright hostility, viewing her as a potential weakness in their carefully balanced fighting unit. "Look at her," mutters Gunnar Halfbeard, a scarred veteran with gray threading his dark hair and old wounds that ache in the salt air. His left cheek bears the white scar where a Saxon Sikhs opened it to the bone 20 years ago, and his right hand is missing 2 fingers from a mace blow taken in the Irish Wars. "A child. We're taking children now." "She killed 2 Saxons," replies Sigurd the Red, methodically sharpening his seeks on a whetstone worn smooth by years of use. His hair lives up to his name, bright copper in the sunlight, and his arms bear the ritual scars that mark a veteran of the berserker companies. "How many Saxons did you kill in your first battle, old man?" "I was 16, Gunnar growls, unconsciously touching the scar on his face. A man grown, not some girl playing with her brother's sword. "Then perhaps," says a new voice, soft and deadly as winter ice, "you would like to test whether she is merely playing." The speaker is Ragnhild Thor's daughter, called the Raven Feeder for reasons that become clear to anyone who has seen her fight. She sits cross-legged near the mast, working oil into the leather grip of her warhammer with the methodical care of someone who trusts her life to her weapons. She doesn't look up from her task, but somehow her words carry the weight of absolute authority. Ragnhild is Ingrid's second in command and the most feared woman in the Orkney Islands. She stands 6 feet tall in her bare feet, with the broad shoulders and corded muscles of someone who has spent half her life swinging heavy weapons. Her blonde hair is cut short in the warrior fashion, and her blue eyes hold the kind of cold calculation that makes even veteran fighters nervous. "The girl has the smell of death on her," Ragnhild continues, still not raising her eyes from her weapon maintenance. She has looked into the face of the corpse goddess and not blinked. That matters more than her age or the size of her sword arm. Gunnar subsides into sullen silence. No one argues with Ragnhild twice, not if they value their health. The Raven Feeder earned her reputation through deeds that are whispered about in drinking halls from Dublin to Constantinople, and her loyalty to Ingrid is matched only by her intolerance for weakness. Astrid listens to this exchange without comment, but she files it away in her memory alongside a dozen other observations about the crew dynamics. Lesson 1. Respect must be earned through deed, not given because of birth or status. Lesson 2. In this company, her sex matters less than her skill with weapons. Lesson 3. She has allies she doesn't know about yet, and enemies she hasn't identified. The Storm Rider sails north for 6 days, threading between islands where seals bask on black rocks and cormorants dive for fish in the pewter-colored waters. They pass fishing boats whose crews wave and call out greetings in the Norse tongue, their voices carrying across the water with news and gossip from distant settlements. They see smoke rising from farmsteads hidden in protected bays, evidence of the scattered communities that these northern waters like pearls on a broken string. This is Ingrid's domain, the sea roads she has traveled for 15 years, the waters where she has built her reputation one successful raid at a time. Every island captain knows the Storm Rider's distinctive sail. Every harbor master respects the dragon banner that flies from her mast. She is not just a war leader, but a political force, a power broker who can make the difference between prosperity and ruin for the communities along her route. On the seventh day, they reach their destination. The island rises from the sea like the back of a sleeping dragon, its shores ringed with cliffs that would shatter any ship foolish enough to approach in storm weather. But there is a harbor, carefully hidden from casual observation, carved from the living rock by generations of warriors who needed a safe place to rest between campaigns. Buildings cling to the rocky slopes like barnacles on a ship's hull. Stone houses with turf roofs that blend into the landscape. Workshops where smiths forge steel and shipwrights build vessels designed for speed and stealth. Practice grounds where warriors hone their skills against opponents who fight back with genuine intent to win. This is Raven's home, Ingrid's stronghold, home to the warband that serves Earl Magnus of the Orkney Islands. It is a place that exists outside the normal rules of civilization, where might makes right and reputation is the only currency that matters. And this is where Astrid will either become a warrior or die trying. The longhouse at the island's heart has stood for 200 years, its massive oak beams weathered by countless storms, and its stone foundations built to last until the end of the world. The great hall can seat 100 warriors, its long tables scarred by knives and ale horns, its walls hung with shields and weapons taken from defeated enemies. Banners hang from the rafters, some bearing the personal devices of famous warriors, others showing the arms of defeated foes, whose wealth now fills the stronghold's treasure rooms. The air is thick with smoke from the central hearth, and heavy with the scent of roasted meat, ale, and the particular mixture of leather, steel, and sweat that marks a place where violence is both profession and calling. At the high table sits Earl Magnus himself, a man of perhaps 50 years with silver threading his black beard and eyes like winter ice. He wears a simple woolen tunic and leather breeches, but the sword at his side is worth more than most men see in a lifetime, and the golden arm rings that mark his wealth and status gleam in the firelight. He watches as Ingrid presents her newest recruit, this farm girl who claims she can be a warrior. His gaze is measuring, calculating, weighing potential against risk with the eye of a man who has been judging fighting men and women for 3 decades. So young, he muses, studying Astrid with the same attention he might give to a horse he was considering purchasing. What do you see in her, Wolf-Mother? Potential, Ingrid replies without hesitation. And hunger. She killed her first enemies at 12, my lord, and asked for more. That kind of appetite for violence cannot be taught. Either you have it or you don't. Killing and fighting are different arts, Magnus says thoughtfully. Any fool can swing a sword in anger. A warrior must think, must adapt, must survive when the blade work is done and the real consequences begin. He leans forward, his gaze fixed on Astrid with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. Tell me, girl, why do you want to be a shield maiden? The hall falls silent. Every warrior present stops what they are doing to listen. Conversations halt mid-sentence. Dice games pause with the bones unthrown. Even the servants cease their movements to hear what the new recruit will say. This is a test, Astrid realizes, and her answer will determine how the rest of her time here unfolds. She could lie, could speak of honor and glory, of serving the gods and earning a place in Valhalla. These are the words they expect, the proper responses of a young person seeking to join a warband. But Astrid has never been good at lying, and she senses that this audience would see through any false sentiment immediately. These are people who live by violence and deception, who can read truth and falsehood like runes carved in stone. Because, she says, her young voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, when I killed those Saxons, I felt alive for the first time in my life. Because I am tired of pretending to be something I am not. Because I would rather die as a warrior than live as anything else. The silence stretches out, taut as a bowstring drawn to its breaking point. Then Earl Magnus begins to laugh. It starts as a chuckle, deep in his chest, then builds to full-throated mirth that echoes off the stone walls like the sound of distant thunder. Other warriors begin to join in, not mockingly, but with genuine appreciation for an honest answer honestly given. You hear that? Magnus calls out to his gathered fighters, raising his silver-mounted drinking horn. She would rather die as a warrior than live as anything else. By Thor's hammer, I said the same thing when I was her age. He stands, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, to honesty, to courage, to the girl who will either die gloriously or become legend. The hall erupts in cheers and the rhythmic pounding of fists on tables. Warriors who have never spoken to Astrid raise their horns and salute, their voices joining in approval of her words. She feels heat rise in her cheeks, but she stands straight and proud, meeting their gaze without flinching. She has passed the first test, but the real testing has not yet begun. The next morning, before dawn breaks over the eastern horizon, Ragnhild kicks Astrid awake with the casual efficiency of someone who has roused many reluctant warriors over the years. "Up," she growls, her voice carrying the authority of someone who expects instant obedience. Training begins now. Astrid rolls out of her sleeping furs, every muscle in her body protesting the movement. The sea voyage has left her stiff and sore, and the straw mattress in the warrior's barracks is hardly more comfortable than sleeping on the bare ground. Around her, other warriors are beginning to stir, but none offer help or advice. She is on her own now, dressed, armed, outside in the time it takes me to piss. Ragnhild disappears through the door, leaving Astrid to fumble for her clothes in the pre-dawn darkness. The barracks is a long, low building that houses the unmarried warriors of both sexes, with sleeping areas separated by hanging curtains that provide the illusion of privacy while allowing for quick response to alarms. She dresses quickly in the practical clothing of a warrior, woolen breeches that won't catch on weapons, a linen shirt that breathes with movement, a leather jerkin reinforced with iron rings that will turn a glancing blow. Her sword belt goes around her waist, the blade that served her well in her first battle now feeling familiar in her hand. A round shield painted with simple geometric designs completes her gear. Outside, the island is shrouded in mist that rises from the sea like the breath of sleeping giants. The air is cold and damp, carrying the smell of salt and seaweed mixed with the smoke from cooking fires and forges that never fully cool. In the growing light, she can see other warriors moving about their morning routines, some heading to the practice grounds, others to the harbor to tend their ships. Ragnhild waits in the practice yard, her own weapons already in hand. She wears a simple woolen dress that reaches to her knees, practical garments that allow for unrestricted movement. Her warhammer hangs from her belt, its iron head gleaming with the careful maintenance that marks a professional's tools. "First lesson," she says without preamble, not bothering with pleasantries or encouragement. "You killed 2 Saxons, yes, but they were surprised, frightened, fighting for their lives in a place they didn't know. Today you face a warrior who is ready for you, who knows this ground, who has been fighting since before you were born. Today you learn the difference between murder and combat." She doesn't give Astrid time to prepare mentally for what's coming. The attack comes swift as a striking snake, Ragnhild's sword cutting through the morning air with a whistle that speaks of perfect balance and deadly intent. Astrid gets her shield up barely. The impact drives her back 3 steps, her arm immediately numb from wrist to shoulder. The force behind the blow is tremendous, not just the strength of Ragnhild's arm, but the accumulated weight of years of training and practical experience. Ragnhild doesn't pause to gloat or explain, simply continues her assault with mechanical precision that speaks of countless hours of practice. Strike, block, strike again. Each blow perfectly placed, each movement economical and deadly. Within moments, Astrid is gasping for breath, her guard crumbling under the relentless pressure. The older woman's sword point comes to rest against Astrid's throat, the steel cold against her skin. "Dead," Ragnhild announces matter-of-factly. "First lesson, arrogance kills faster than arrows. You fought well against surprised enemies who were thinking about escape rather than victory. Against a prepared warrior, you lasted perhaps 10 heartbeats. She steps back, lowering her weapon but keeping her stance ready for immediate action. Again, this time Astrid lasts 15 heartbeats before Ragnhild's blade finds her throat. The third time, 20. Each attempt teaches her something new about the reality of armed combat, the importance of footwork, the need to think 3 moves ahead, the way fatigue clouds judgment and slows reactions. By the end of the first hour, she is bleeding from a dozen small cuts where Ragnhild's sword has slipped past her guard. Her shield arm feels like it might fall off, and she has been killed more times than she can count. Better, Ragnhild admits grudgingly as they pause for water. You learn quickly, which is good, but quick learning means nothing if you don't survive long enough to use it. Raw talent without discipline gets you a hero's funeral and a disappointed family. Day after day, the training continues with the relentless rhythm of waves against a rocky shore. Sword work in the morning, when the mind is sharp but the body still remembers sleep. Spear fighting at midday, when the sun is high and shadows short, teaching the different rhythms and distances of longer weapons. Wrestling and grappling in the afternoon, when fatigue makes every movement an effort of will. Astrid learns to read the subtle shifts in an opponent's stance that telegraph their next move. The slight forward lean that precedes a thrust, the tiny adjustment of weight that signals a cut to the left or right. She learns to use her smaller size as an advantage, to slip inside a larger opponent's guard where their greater reach becomes a liability rather than an asset. She learns the names and uses of weapons she had never imagined. The Sikhs, the short stabbing knife that kills in close quarters, where longer blades become unwieldy. The Francisca, the throwing axe that can drop an enemy at 20 paces if the thrower knows the proper technique. The Langsiks, the long knife that serves as both tool and weapon, equally useful for cutting rope or cutting throats. Each weapon has its place, its purpose, its proper technique. More importantly, each has its weaknesses, ranges where it becomes ineffective, situations where it becomes a liability rather than an asset. A master warrior knows not just how to use every weapon, but when not to use it. But weapons are only part of a warrior's education, and perhaps not even the most important part. Ingrid herself teaches the arts of strategy and tactics during the long northern evenings when darkness falls early and the aurora dances across the sky. How to read a battlefield, to spot the moment when a shield wall begins to waver under pressure, to know when to press an attack and when to withdraw to better ground. A berserker fights with fury, Ingrid explains as they stand on the cliffs above the harbor, watching fishing boats return with the day's catch while seabirds wheel and cry overhead. But fury without thought is just madness wearing armor. A true warrior fights with a cold mind and a hot heart. The mind plans, the heart executes. Astrid nods, filing away another lesson in the growing catalog of warrior wisdom that she accumulates like a miser hoarding gold. Around them, the island bustles with activity that never truly stops. Warriors maintain their gear with the obsessive care of people who trust their lives to steel and leather. Ships are repaired and provisioned for voyages that may last months. Scouts return with news from distant shores, their reports shaping the plans of commanders who think in terms of seasons and years. This is not just a training ground, she realizes, but a war machine, always preparing for the next campaign, the next opportunity, the next chance to win wealth and glory through violence. When will I be ready for real battle? She asks during one of these evening sessions, her voice carrying the impatience of youth eager to test itself against worthy opponents. Ingrid considers the question for a long moment, her pale eyes studying the girl who has trained under her guidance for 3 months now. In that time, she has watched Astrid grow from a promising but untested recruit into something approaching a competent fighter. When you stop asking that question, she says finally, when you know, in your bones and blood and the deepest parts of your mind, that you can face whatever comes without doubt or fear. Some reach that point in a year, others train for a decade and never reach it at all. And those who never reach it, they die, Ingrid says simply. Usually quickly, usually messily, usually in a way that gets other people killed too. That's why we're careful about who we take into battle. That night, as Astrid tends her gear in the barracks with the methodical care that has become second nature, an older shield maiden named Thurid approaches her sleeping area. Thurid is perhaps 25, a veteran of a dozen campaigns with scars on her arms that tell stories of battles fought and won. She has a reputation for deadly accuracy with throwing spears and an ability to remain calm under pressure that has saved her life more than once. "May I sit?" she asks, her voice carrying the courtesy that warriors show to each other regardless of rank or experience. Astrid nods, curious. Thurid has been friendly but distant during the training, offering advice when asked but otherwise keeping to herself with the reserve that marks someone who has seen too much violence to take anything for granted. "I wanted to tell you something," Thurid says, settling cross-legged on the floor with the easy grace of someone comfortable in her own body, about what it means to be a shield maiden in this world. She is quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts while her fingers unconsciously trace the pattern of an old scar that runs from her wrist to her elbow. "Men will always question your right to be here," she continues, her voice low enough to avoid disturbing the other occupants of the barracks. "They will say you are too weak, too emotional, too delicate for the warrior's path. Some will try to protect you, thinking they do you a kindness. Others will try to break you, thinking they serve some greater purpose by proving that women don't belong on battlefields." Thurid's hand moves unconsciously to a long scar that runs from her collarbone to her shoulder, a white line against tanned skin that speaks of a wound that came very close to being fatal. "I got this in my second battle," she says. "Not from an enemy, but from one of our own warriors. He thought I was getting in his way, that my presence would get him killed, so he decided to remove the problem before it could manifest." "What did you do?" "I killed him," Thurid says simply, her voice carrying no emotion beyond simple statement of fact. "Not in anger, not in vengeance, but as a matter of survival. And I made sure everyone saw it happen. After that, the questioning stopped." She meets Astrid's eyes directly, her gaze steady and serious. "I'm not telling you this to frighten you, but to prepare you. Being a shield maiden means fighting two wars simultaneously, one against the enemies you face in battle, and one against those who think you don't belong on the battlefield at all. You must be twice as skilled, twice as brave, twice as ruthless as any man if you want to earn their respect." "And if I'm not?" Astrid asks. "Then you die," Thurid says matter-of-factly, "either from an enemy's blade or from your own people's neglect when you need them most. There's no middle ground for women like us. We succeed completely, or we fail completely." She stands to leave, then pauses at the doorway as if remembering something important. "But I will say this, I've watched you train for 3 months now. You have the skill and the heart for this life. What you need to develop is the killer's instinct, the ability to end a fight without hesitation or mercy. That comes only through experience, through facing real enemies who want you dead." After Thurid leaves, Astrid lies in her sleeping furs, staring up at the shadows dancing on the ceiling cast by the dying fire. Tomorrow will bring another day of training, another step on the path toward becoming what she was born to be. But tonight, she thinks about Thurid's words, about the price of being different in a world that rewards conformity with survival. She thinks about the 2 Saxons she killed, and how right it felt when their blood ran down her blade. And she wonders if she truly has the strength to pay the price that her chosen path demands. Outside, the wind rises off the sea, carrying the salt tang of distant storms and the promise of battles yet to come. 6 months after her arrival at Raven's home, Astrid wakes to the sound of war horns echoing across the harbor like the voices of angry gods. The deep, mournful notes speak of ships on the horizon, of opportunity or danger sailing in with the morning tide. She rolls from her sleeping furs and joins the crowd of warriors streaming from the longhouse toward the watchtowers that guard the harbor mouth. On the platform above the docks, Earl Magnus stands with his captains, studying the approaching vessels through the gray pre-dawn light with the calculating gaze of a man who has survived 3 decades of northern politics. 3 ships sailing hard from the southeast with the urgency of vessels carrying crucial news. Their striped sails strain against the wind, and even at distance the watchers can see the desperation in their approach. These are not raiders or traders, but messengers, carrying word that cannot wait for a more civilized hour. The lead ship beaches with a grinding of wood on stone. A young man leaps into the surf, his face flushed with excitement and exhaustion, his clothes bearing the stains of a voyage made without pause for rest or comfort. He wears the colors of Earl Thorkel of the Shetlands, Magnus' sometime ally and frequent rival in the complex web of northern politics. "My Lord Magnus," he calls, splashing through the shallow water with urgent strides. Earl Thorkel sends word. The Scots are moving north in force. 300 warriors, maybe more, marching on Thurso under Kenneth Macduff's banner. They mean to drive us from the northern islands entirely. Magnus descends from the watchtower, his expression thoughtful as he processes this information. The political implications are complex. If the Scots succeed in taking Thurso, they will control the crossing between the mainland and the islands, effectively cutting off Magnus' domain from its sources of supply and reinforcement. "When did they move?" Magnus asks, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affect hundreds of lives. 5 days past, my lord. Thorkel holds them at the river crossing south of the town, but he cannot do so for long. His men are outnumbered and growing tired. He begs your aid, in the name of the old oaths. A murmur runs through the gathered warriors at mention of the old oaths, the promises made between Norse jarls to stand together against common enemies. Sacred bonds that have held the Northern Alliance together for 2 generations, written in blood and sworn before the gods. How many can Thorkel field? Magnus asks, his mind already working through the calculations of distance, time, and fighting strength that will determine his response. Perhaps 200, my lord. Good fighters, but outnumbered and weary from constant skirmishing. Magnus nods slowly, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. We can put 60 warriors on the water within the hour. More if we strip the other islands of their garrisons. My lord. Ingrid steps forward, her voice carrying clearly across the harbor. Request permission to bring the new recruit. She has trained hard these 6 months. It's time to test that training against real enemies. All eyes turn to Astrid. She feels the weight of their collective gaze, the mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and assessment that marks a group of professionals evaluating a potential addition to their ranks. Some of these warriors have fought beside her in training, have seen her progress from clumsy farm girl to competent fighter. Others know her only by reputation. She's still a child, Gunnar Halfbeard mutters, his scarred face showing the doubt that many feel. This isn't a training exercise. The Scots will show no mercy to inexperience. Neither did her first fight, Ragnhild observes dryly, and she acquitted herself well enough then. Magnus studies Astrid with those pale, calculating eyes that seem to see through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. What says the recruit herself? Do you feel ready to face the Scots in honest battle? The question hangs in the salt air like a challenge thrown down before the gods themselves. Astrid feels her heart hammering against her ribs, feels the familiar surge of excitement and fear that comes before violence. She thinks of Thurid's words about the killer's instinct, about ending fights without hesitation or mercy. More importantly, she thinks of the restless energy that has been building in her for months, the need to test herself against something more dangerous than practice partners who pull their blows. I am ready, my lord, she says, and her voice does not shake. Then ready yourself. We sail with the tide. The next hour passes in a blur of controlled chaos as the warband prepares for immediate departure. Warriors check their gear with the methodical care of people who trust their lives to steel and leather. Weapons are sharpened to razor edges. Mail shirts are inspected for weak links. Shields receive fresh coats of paint, and their leather grips are checked for wear. Ships are provisioned with the efficiency that comes from long practice. Food for the journey, ale to keep up morale, spare weapons for those who lose or break their primary arms, medical supplies for the wounded who will inevitably result from any serious fighting. Astrid finds herself assigned to the Storm Rider as part of Ingrid's personal warband, a position that recognizes both her potential and her need for experienced supervision. As she lashes her shield to the ship's rail alongside 20 other painted targets, Thurid appears at her elbow. "Remember what I told you about the killer's instinct," the older woman says quietly, her voice barely audible above the sounds of preparation. "Today you'll learn whether you truly have it." Any specific advice? Stay close to Ragnhild in the fighting. She has the best eye for the flow of battle, and she won't let sentiment get you killed. And remember, the enemy will test you first, thinking you're easy prey because of your age and size. Make them pay for that mistake. The war fleet puts to sea under a gray sky that promises rain before evening. 3 longships cutting through swells that speak of distant storms, their dragon prows cleaving the waves like the swords of angry gods. The Storm Rider leads, her red and white sails straining against the wind. Behind her come the Iron Wolf and the Sea Serpent, each carrying 20 picked warriors and the accumulated wealth of years of successful raiding. Astrid stands in the bow, watching the islands fall away behind them, while spray from the ship's passage stings her face with salt. Somewhere ahead lie the Scottish forces, hardened fighters defending their homeland against Norse expansion. Soon she will face them with steel in her hand and death on her breath. She is 15 years old. She has trained for 6 months under some of the finest warriors in the northern seas, and she is about to discover whether all that training has prepared her for the reality of warfare. The crossing takes 8 hours of hard sailing through waters that grow progressively rougher as they move away from the shelter of the islands. They beach the ships in a sheltered cove 10 miles south of Thurso, where Earl Thorkel's scouts wait to guide them to the battlefield. The news they bring is not encouraging. The Scots have forced the river crossing, the lead scout reports, his young face grim with exhaustion and worry. Thorkel holds the ridge line south of the town, but barely. They've been fighting for 2 days straight, and the men are beginning to break. Magnus nods grimly, processing this information with the calm efficiency of someone who has faced desperate situations before. Then we go in immediately. No time for rest or reconnaissance. They form up on the beach in the battle formation that has served Norse armies for generations. 3 wedges of 20 warriors each, designed to punch through enemy lines and create chaos in their ranks. Astrid finds herself in the center wedge under Ragnhild's direct command, her position carefully chosen to give her support while allowing her to contribute to the fight. The march inland takes them through low hills covered in heather and gorse, the ground boggy in places and treacherous underfoot. The landscape bears the scars of armies, trampled vegetation, abandoned equipment, the occasional corpse left by earlier skirmishing. As they crest the final ridge, the battlefield spreads out below them like a tapestry woven from blood and desperation. Thurso sits on a hill overlooking the river, its stone walls showing fresh scars from recent fighting. Below the town, 2 armies face each other across a stretch of muddy ground torn up by the passage of many feet. On the near side, Earl Thorkel's Norse warriors hold a line of low hills, their shields locked together in the traditional wall formation. They are clearly outnumbered and exhausted, but their position is strong enough to hold against frontal assault as long as their strength lasts. On the far side, the Scottish army spreads across the river valley like a dark tide. 300 men in war paint and clan colors, their round shields bright with tribal symbols, their long spears glinting in the afternoon sun. At their head rides a giant of a man on a black horse, his red beard streaming in the wind like a battle banner. "Kenneth Macduff," Magnus says quietly, recognition in his voice. "I should have known." That bastard has been trying to drive us from these islands for 10 years. As they watch, a horn sounds from the Scottish lines, not the organized signals of disciplined troops, but the wild, primal call that speaks of warriors eager for blood and glory. The entire army begins to move forward, not in the careful advance of trained soldiers, but in the rushing charge of men who trust in courage and fury to carry the day. They mean to break Thorkel's line with sheer weight of numbers, Ragnhild observes, her voice carrying the cool analysis of someone who has seen many battles. And they might succeed. His men are tired. Magnus raises his own horn and blows 3 sharp blasts, the signal for immediate attack. We hit their flank while they're committed to the frontal assault, break their formation, roll up their line from the side. The Norse war cry erupts from 60 throats as they charge down the hillside, voices raised in the ancient song of violence that has echoed across northern battlefields for 1,000 years. Odin, Odin, death to enemies. Astrid runs with them, her heart hammering with an excitement that borders on ecstasy. This is it, her first real battle, her chance to prove herself worthy of the warrior's path. Around her, veteran fighters bound down the slope with the easy grace of wolves, their weapons gleaming in the gray light, their voices raised in harmony with the ravens that circle overhead. The Scottish flank never sees them coming. The Scottish warriors, caught completely off guard by the sudden attack on their flank, turn in confusion as 60 Norse berserkers crash into their ranks like a hammer striking an anvil. The careful momentum of their advance dissolves into chaos as men stumble over fallen comrades and struggle to reorient their weapons toward this unexpected threat. Astrid finds herself swept forward in the tide of violence, Ragnhild beside her like a guardian wolf, the older woman's hammer rising and falling with mechanical precision. The first Scottish warrior she encounters is a bearded giant with paint streaking his face in blue spirals, his eyes wide with surprise as he sees death coming in the form of a girl barely reaching his shoulder. He swings his long-handled axe in a clumsy arc, overconfident and off-balance. Astrid ducks under the blow and drives her sword upward, the blade sliding between his ribs with the surgical precision that 6 months of brutal training has taught her. Hot blood splashes across her face as the Scot topples backward, his eyes already glazing with the look of the newly dead. The second kill comes easier than the first. A young warrior, perhaps her own age, tries to flee from the Norse onslaught and runs directly into her path. Her blade takes him in the back as he turns, piercing his heart from behind in a strike that would have horrified her farm girl self, but feels natural as breathing to the weapon she has become. Around her, the battle rages with the fury of unleashed storms. Steel rings against steel, shields splinter under the impact of axes and hammers. Men scream in pain and rage, and the simple desperation of staying alive for one more heartbeat. The air fills with the metallic taste of blood and the acrid smoke of burning thatch from buildings set ablaze by scattered brands. But gradually, inevitably, the superior numbers of the Scots begin to tell. Despite the chaos caused by the Norse flank attack, Kenneth Macduff's warriors are veterans in their own right, hardened fighters who know how to adapt to changing circumstances. They begin to reorganize, forming small groups that can support each other, using their numerical advantage to surround and overwhelm isolated Norse fighters. Fall back. Magnus roars above the din of battle, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. Reform on the ridge. The withdrawal is fighting retreat of the kind that separates professional warriors from mere fighters. Step by step, shield to shield, the Norse warriors give ground while maintaining their formation, making the Scots pay in blood for every foot of muddy earth. Those who fall are left behind. There is no time for sentiment when survival is at stake. Astrid runs with them, her sword red to the cross guard, her shield battered by blows she barely remembers receiving. Behind her, Scottish war cries grow louder as the enemy presses their advantage, sensing that the Norse line is beginning to crack under the pressure. They reach the ridge, where Thorkel's exhausted warriors still hold their ground, and for a moment it seems they might consolidate their position, might turn this retreat into a defendable stand. But Kenneth MacDuff has not survived 20 years of tribal warfare by allowing his enemies time to recover. The Scottish charge comes like a breaking wave. 300 voices raised in the ancient battle cry of the clans. They surge up the hillside with the fury of men fighting for their homeland, their shields locked together, their spears thrust forward like the bristling back of some great beast. "This is where we die well," Ragnhild says quietly, her hammer balanced in her hand, her pale eyes fixed on the approaching enemy with the calm acceptance of someone who has always known this day would come. But Astrid is not ready to die. Not here, not now, not when she has just begun to taste what she was born to be. "No," she says, her voice carrying across the ridge with surprising authority. "This is where we win." She steps forward alone, walking down the slope toward 300 Scottish warriors, with nothing but steel in her hand and death in her heart. Behind her, the Norse fighters watch in stunned silence as this 15-year-old farm girl places herself between them and annihilation. The Scots slow their advance, confused by this singular figure walking toward them without fear. Some laugh, thinking her mad. Others grip their weapons tighter, sensing something in her movement that speaks to older instincts, older fears. Astrid stops 50 paces from their line and raises her sword above her head, the blade catching what little sunlight penetrates the gray clouds. "I am Astrid Jornsdottir," she calls, her young voice carrying clearly across the battlefield. "I claim the right of single combat. Let your champion face me, and let the gods decide which army deserves this field." A murmur runs through the Scottish ranks, surprise, contempt, and underneath it all, a superstitious dread. The right of single combat is ancient law, recognized by all northern peoples, protected by oaths older than memory. To refuse such a challenge is to invite the wrath of the gods themselves. Kenneth MacDuff rides forward on his black horse, his red beard streaming in the wind like a banner of war. He is a giant of a man, easily 6.5 feet tall, with arms like tree trunks and scars that speak of 100 battles fought and won. "A child," he says, his voice thick with contempt and tinged with the accent of the Highlands. "They send a child to face me." "I see no child here," Astrid replies steadily. "Only a warrior who has come to claim your head." The Scottish chieftain laughs, but the sound holds no real mirth. "Very well, little wolf. You have called for single combat, and I accept. When I kill you, your friends on the ridge will lay down their weapons and accept judgment. This I swear before my gods and yours." Magnus shouts something from the ridge, probably ordering her to withdraw, but Astrid no longer hears anything but the sound of her own heartbeat and the whisper of wind across the heather. This is the moment she has been born for, trained for, dreaming of through 6 months of brutal preparation. Kenneth MacDuff dismounts from his horse and draws his sword, a massive two-handed blade that gleams like silver fire in the gray light. It is a weapon forged for a giant, too heavy for most men to wield effectively, but in his hands it moves like a living thing. They circle each other in the space between the armies, predator and prey, though which is which remains to be seen. The silence is complete now. Even the ravens have stopped their calling, as if the world itself holds its breath to see what will unfold. The Scottish chieftain attacks first, his great sword cutting through the air with the sound of death itself. Astrid rolls aside, feeling the wind of its passage ruffle her hair, her smaller size and quicker reflexes saving her from a blow that would have split her in half. She comes up inside his guard, her blade seeking the gap beneath his arm where his mail shirt doesn't quite overlap. But Kenneth is fast for such a large man, spinning away from her thrust with the fluid grace of someone who has danced this dance many times before. For long minutes they trade blows, neither able to find a decisive opening. Kenneth's reach and strength are tremendous, but Astrid's speed and training allow her to stay just ahead of his attacks while landing cuts of her own. Small wounds that bleed but don't cripple. The death of 1,000 cuts that will eventually slow even a giant. But gradually, inevitably, Her youth begins to tell against her. Kenneth MacDuff has been fighting for 20 years, his body hardened by decades of warfare, his stamina built up through campaigns that lasted months. Astrid, for all her skill and fury, is still 15 years old, still limited by the physical constraints of her age. Her breathing becomes labored. Her parries arrive a fraction of a second slower. Kenneth senses the change and presses his advantage, his massive sword driving her back step by step toward the watching armies. Then, just as it seems her strength will fail entirely, Astrid does something that no one expects. She stops retreating and steps directly into Kenneth's next attack, accepting a glancing blow to her shoulder in exchange for getting inside the arc of his swing. Her sword, guided by instinct and 6 months of brutal training, finds the gap in his mail shirt just below the sternum. The blade slides home with the wet sound of steel parting flesh, piercing heart and lung with surgical precision. Kenneth MacDuff looks down at the sword protruding from his chest, looks up at the girl who has killed him, and topples backward into the heather with a crash like a falling tree. The silence that follows is absolute, profound, the kind of quiet that comes only when the impossible has just become reality. 300 Scottish warriors stare at their fallen champion, their minds struggling to process what they have just witnessed. Then someone, it might be Magnus, it might be Thorkel, it might be the gods themselves, breaks the silence with a war cry that echoes across the hills like thunder. Odin, victory! The girl has won the day. The Scottish army, leaderless and demoralized by the death of their champion, begins to withdraw in good order, but without stomach for further fighting. The ancient law has been honored. The gods have spoken through trial by combat, and their will cannot be disputed. As the enemy departs, the Norse warriors surge down from the ridge to surround their unlikely champion. Hands pound her back, voices raise her name to the cloudy sky. Ale is produced from somewhere and pressed into her hands. But Astrid barely hears the celebration. She stands over Kenneth MacDuff's body, sword still in her hand, feeling the familiar rightness that comes with victory in combat. She is covered in blood, some her own, some belonging to the 4 men she has killed this day. She is 15 years old. She has just won her first battle through single combat against a legendary warrior. And she knows, with absolute certainty, that this is only the beginning. The saga of Astrid the Shield Maiden has begun, and the northern seas will never be the same.